Okay, today's our lecture is on information security management. This is module number 15, which is the last module of the series on CompTIA Security Plus Guide to Network Security Fundamentals. Now, this is very important topic because we know that it's a very critical component of cybersecurity and IT management. So we'll explore the depth of information security management. We'll delve into why assets protection is crucial, and we'll understand the essence of change management and more. So let's get started and see that what is information security management. Information security management refers to the processes and policies that organizations implement to protect their information assets from threats and vulnerabilities. So the main components of that one could be policies, processes, or the procedures. So information security management encompasses a comprehensive approach that organizations are usually take or use to ensure that their information assets are well protected against any sort of attacks. This is a management system, or we can say that this is a management system in which we'll just talk about the settings and defenses, but we will go a bit beyond that while we'll be creating the structures and environment where information security is consistently maintained. It involves developing the policies that provide a framework for action, processes that define how the activities should be carried out, and a procedure that specify exact steps for establishing or to accomplish a particular security task. This is a strategic alignment which helps the organizations to safeguard their information throughout the life cycle of information security management. An example could be a company can implement an information security policy that mandates the regular security audits to ensure the compliance with the best practices. Then we'll see the importance of assets protection. We might have different sort of assets in our organizations, but it is really important to understand that how critical they are, and if there are any vulnerabilities on that, how can that pose a threat to your infrastructure. So asset protection refers to the strategies and the practices used to safeguard the organizational assets from risks such as theft, damage, or unauthorized access. So we could have physical security, data security, or human resources. So asset protection is a fundamental aspect of cybersecurity, focusing on shielding the organization's valuable resources. This does not only include the physical assets like the office hardware or the facilities, but also a very valuable asset which we call as data that organizations collect, store, and process. Moreover, the human resources aspect would emphasize on the importance of training of the employees to be aware of the responsiveness and their readiness toward the security incidents. Effective asset protection would involve multiple layers of security to ensure a comprehensive protection against various sort of attacks. So we'll have to make sure that our people are properly trained, that if they are encountered any sort of security threat, before even informing it to the information security department, they must be well equipped. They must have enough knowledge to deal with those situations themselves. An example could be a company can install a surveillance cameras and a door access control to the data centers to prevent the unauthorized physical access over there. Then we'll see the importance of change management. It's a management in a systematic approach to manage the changes in an organization to minimize the disruption and to enhance the security. We can talk about change control process, impact assessment, and communication plan. So change management plays a pivotal role in maintaining the security and efficiency of operations, especially when adjustments are made within the organization's IT environment. It incorporates the controlled processes for introducing changes, which includes a thorough impact assessment to understand how the changes could affect the existing security measures, and a well-structured communication plan to ensure that the stakeholders are on the same page and they are aware of the changes that we are making. So If you have a proper change management in place, it would even help you that if the people are coming and leaving the organization, they have proper documentation for that, and any other person who will be there, they can better understand that what changes were made in the past with proper justifications that these were the reasons why you made those changes. So in case if it goes wrong or it does not work as expected in the longer term, you can revert those changes. Example could be a business implement a change control process that would require IT staff to submit a request before upgrading any software systems, ensuring that all security considerations are properly addressed in that. Then we have different asset protection strategies. Asset protection strategies would involve the measures taken to safeguard the assets against threats and vulnerabilities. So risk assessment could be there, access controls, and backup solutions. So discussing the asset protection strategies involves the, for example, looking into the proactive measures the organization would take to safeguard or to guard against the threats and vulnerabilities. This would include the conducting detailed risk assessment to understand the potential threats, implementing stringent access controls to prevent unauthorized access, and to establish the robust backup solutions to recover data in case of loss or breach. These strategies are the integral part of the security approach to ensure all aspects of the security are covered, so that we are not leaving anything behind, just to make sure that our all endpoints are properly protected. An example could be an organization can perform a risk assessment annually to identify and mitigate the potential security threats. Then we have change management process. It's a change process in which a structured approach to managing the changes in the organization or the IT department to minimize the risk and maintain the security. So we can have a change request or the approval workflow or implementation plan. So now we are talking about a proper process. So in the context of IT change management process, it's a meticulous structured to manage the alterations and updates that could impact the system security. So this process would include a formal change request that must pass through the rigorous approval workflows before they are implemented. The change management would also ensure that every change is planned, executed, and reviewed methodologically to minimize the risk and disruptions that would have. So you'll have to assess that we have change requests, so all the departments should be notified that we are going to make those changes. There should be an approval workflow that if it's a major change, you should be taking proper approvals for that. And then there should be an implementation plan of it that we will be conducting it in the off-peak hours, so that you're not affecting the people who are working in their offices. A company can use a change management request form that must be approved by the IT manager before any changes are made to the system. Then there are different type of assets. So assets are the resources that have value to an organization and require protection. So if we are talking about different type of assets, we categorize them into data, software, physical items, and services. So all are integral part of business operations and require diligent protection. Now, managing these assets involves not just tracking and inventory, but also overseeing the entire life cycle from the acquisition to decommissioning, ensuring that at every stage the assets integrity and security is maintained. Example could be an organization can consider its customer database, proprietary software, physical servers, and IT support services and critical assets to be handled properly. Then we have different types of assets. We have asset acquisition, asset alignment, tangible assets, intangible assets, asset tracking, asset enumeration, and inventory, and then finally decommissioning. So we'll try to understand it one by one. So asset acquisition is when we would try to buy or purchase a software or an asset. The process would obtain the assets from an organization entirely through the purchase, lease, or by other means. It's a complete process of that. For example, purchasing new servers or to enhance the data storage capacity. Then asset assignment, it's a process in which we would specify that the assets to a particular individual or the team can use it for their official purposes. Assigning a laptop to a specific employee for remote work, etc. So you'll have the tag management and all those things in that. Then you have tangible assets. This is the physical items that have the value and they can be touched or measured. So most of the items that we purchase, for example, servers and workstations, they are quite expensive. So usually we tag them to keep a track of it. So a company hardware such as computers, servers, and printers can be properly managed. Then we have intangible assets, non-physical assets that represent a value in an organization, for example, software licenses, etc. So you'll have to make sure that you are keeping track of all the softwares that requires updates and licensing, etc. Asset tracking methods for monitoring the location of the status and asset management through the life cycle, using the software tool to track the laptops issued to the employees. So if an asset is issued to an employee, it would be tagged with the ID number of that employee, and then that employee should be responsible to update for any change in the location of those items. Asset enumeration is a process of identifying and listing all assets within an organization, conducting an annual audit to list all the physical digital assets. Then we have the inventory, a complete list of items owned by the organization, typically include the details such as the location and the condition of those assets. Should be maintained the inventory of all the hardware, software, and tools which are used. Then assets decommissioning is also a very important process where the retiring or the removing the assets from the active service after removing the secure disposal and recycling, for example, removing the hard drives and RAMs from those computers, properly wiping out the data, or maybe destroying the assets if they are not used. Then we have Cybersecurity Asset Management. We call it as CAM as well. CAM is a process of managing the protection of the organizational information assets throughout their life cycle. So it would include asset inventory, asset tracking, and life cycle management. Cybersecurity asset management is an essential process where an organization manages and secures its information assets across its entire life cycle. The goal here is not just to protect the assets, but to ensure the optimal performance and compliance throughout their usage within the organization. The process would begin from the asset inventory, which would involve creating the detailed list of all the assets along with their configurations. This inventory serves as the foundational tool that would help in managing the assets effectively. Next, we'll have asset tracking, which would help us in continuously monitoring the status of these assets and noting any changes or updates. This continuously monitor and help in maintaining up-to-date records about spotting any irregularities, etc. Finally, when we talk about the lifecycle management, it would involve managing the assets from the point that they are acquired until the decommissioning phase. So the components would ensure that each phase of this asset life management would make sure that the security and efficiency of the items are there, from the installation to maintenance and even eventually the retirement of those assets. Example could be a company maintains an updated asset inventory using the asset management tool that tracks the asset and device management on the network. Then we have change management. It's a systematic approach of managing the changes in the organization IT environment while minimizing the disruptions to ensure the security integrity. Policies, standards, and procedures could be there. So it's a systematic approach aimed to ensuring the changes in the IT environment whenever they are introduced in a controlled and secure manner. The approach would minimize the disruptions and maintain the integrity of the system. It starts from defining the policies that would govern how the changes should be managed. These policies would provide a framework for the entire process, ensuring that all the actions are standardized and aligned with the organizational objectives. Then we have the standards. They are established to be the benchmarks, for example, for managing these changes, ensuring consistency across all departments. And finally, the procedures, which are the details of a specific step needed to implement the changes effectively by providing clear guidelines to help executing these changes without compromising security and functionality of the assets. Now, the example could be a company can have a change management policy that outlines how to submit and approve these changes in IT systems. Then we have change management process. It's a structured activities, for example, involved in managing changes, in minimizing the risk, and to ensure a smooth transition. The components could be change request submission, impact assessment, approval workflow, implementation plan, and post-implementation review. So what happens is that within a change management, several structured activities would help manage the introduction of changes smoothly and securely. These processes would start, for example, with change request submission, where a formal proposal for change would be submitted for evaluation. This would be followed by impact assessment, where the potential effects of those proposed changes would be evaluated to understand its implications on the current system and processes. Then there will be an approval workflow, which would outline the necessary steps for approving or rejecting the changes or requests, ensuring that every change is scrutinized before the changes are implemented. And then the implementation plan, which would be about details about how the approved changes will be executed or communicated to the end users. And then we have post-implementation review, where we will analyze the outcome of the identify any lessons learned from the areas of improvement, etc. So example could be, after changing an implemented IT team would conduct a review of assess the impact of the system performance and documentation for any changes or the problems which would arise out of these changes. Then we have policies in change management. It's a formal statement that guides the change management process within an organization. So that would include change control policy, which outlines the procedures for requesting, reviewing, and implementing the changes. Then we have emergency change policy, which would provide guideline in handling the urgent changes that require immediate attention. Sorry, there was a typo. I have removed it. Now we have standards and procedures. So that in standards and procedures, it's a standard set of benchmark for change management practices, while procedures are outline of a specific step which are achieved for the compliance of those standards. So we have standard operating procedures. We call it as SOPs, detailed instructions of performing specific change, and compliance standards, which would be the guidelines to ensure the changes align with the regulatory and organization requirements. So a standard change operating procedure would be about the details and the steps of conducting a risk assessment before implementing a change. Now we are talking about managing a change impact. So that's a process of assessing and mitigating the effect of changes in the organization. So it is about the risk assessment, first of all, to identify the potential risks related to the changes. Then stakeholder communication to keep the parties informed about the changes and their potential impacts. And finally, the training and support to ensure that everyone affected by the change can adapt effectively or can adapt the changes which are enforced effectively. So the example could be that prior to major software upgrade, the IT department will conduct training sessions with the staffs just to make sure that they have enough knowledge about the new features which would be there in the system. Now we have risk management, and we'll be talking about first of all that how can we assess the risk in an organization, any sort of IT risk, a process of identifying and assessing or mitigating the risk to organization assets and operations to ensure the security and compliance. So we'll have risk assessment and risk mitigation in this one. So we'll have to understand the risk assessment analysis is important, and a structured approach in the organizations to proactively manage the potential threats. Now, there would be different methods which would be used for that, but we have, for example, first of all, roles and responsibilities could be there in risk assessment. Then we can understand the internal threats, guard against the external threats, or adhere to the regulations, etc. So likewise, the components of this one is, as I told, that risk assessment and mitigation could be there. The strategies to minimize those kind of risk. And the example could be conducting a risk assessment to identify the potential vulnerabilities in the software deployment, etc. If we are talking about the proper ways of properly assessing the analysis of it on every step, so we'll define the roles of it, then we'll be talking about the responsibilities, internal threats, external risk, compliance risk, and all those things. So internal risk could be arising from within the organization, like any sort of legacy systems that are being used, which does not meet any current standards. So sometimes it happens that the operating system that you are using, they are end of service and end of life. So you'll have to understand that risk, and you'll have to put in efforts in order to isolate that system from the environment. Otherwise, it could pose a lot of danger to your infrastructure. Then could be external risk originating from outside the organization, including the threats from the third parties or change in the regulations. So you'll have to assess your own infrastructure from within and outside, and for that sometimes we conduct the penetration testing to know the vulnerabilities in our systems. Compliance risks would be to ensure the software and systems comply with the licensing agreements and the regulatory requirements. Example could be to identify legacy systems that no longer receive the security updates and can pose a risk to the data integrity. Then we have bias in the risk assessment. So it could be a cognitive bias that can affect the decision making during the risk assessment process, leading to inaccurate evaluations, etc. So there would be some common cognitive biases in the risk assessment. We'll see them one by one. For example, aggregate bias. This bias would occur when the decision makers overemphasize collective data and overlook the nuances of the individual cases. In risk assessment, it might lead to ignoring unique threats to specific parts of the organization because they don't appear significant in the broader data set. Then we have anchoring bias. Anchoring bias is the tendency to rely too heavily on the first piece of information encountered. For example, if an initial risk analysis suggests a low threat level, subsequent evaluations may be influenced by that, by initial findings, even if new evidence suggests that a high risk is available. Then availability bias. This bias would involve judging the likelihood of an event based on how easily examples come to mind. For instance, if a company has recently experienced a phishing attack, there might be an overestimation that future phishing risk would be there while neglecting the other kind of attacks as well. Then we have confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to focus on information that confirms pre-existing beliefs and ignore the evidences that we have. In risk assessment, this can lead to disregarding the emerging threats, and we don't expect the patterns to follow. Thus, we can underestimate the severity of the new vulnerabilities. Then we have the present bias. The present bias describes the inclination of an overdue immediate reward and long-term consequences, etc. So in cybersecurity, this might manifest the prioritizing the short-term cost savings over the investments on the long term. Then we have farming effect. The farming effect would influence the decisions based on how information is presented rather than the information itself. For example, the way potential losses or gains from a certain security investment are framed can significantly affect the decision-making process. Then we have a fundamental attribution error. The bias involves the overemphasizing the personal characteristics to explain someone's behavior while underestimating the situational factors, etc. So now we have risk impact and management metrics. So if we are talking about it, we have mean time between the failure. So if we'll explain it, it's a reliability metric used to predict the time between the inherent failure of a system during the operation. It's particularly useful in assessing the reliability of a non-repairable system. This metric is crucial for planning the maintenance, predicting the system performance, and understanding the expected lifespan of a system component. So by measuring the mean time between failure, organizations can get clear picture of the system reliability and make informed decisions about when to conduct the preventive maintenance to minimize the downtime. Example could be a server can operate for an average of 200 hours before experiencing a failure on it. Then we have mean time to recover. It's an average time required to repair a system or a component and return it to the operational status after a failure occurs. This metric is a key for evaluating how quickly an organization can respond to failures and restores its services. It's directly related to the efficiency of the response and repair process. The shorter MTTR indicates a quicker recovery from the failures, minimizing the operational disruptions and reducing the potential impact on business operations. So, for example, it can take average 2 hours to fix a server after a crash happens. Then we have mean time to failure, MTTF. It's similar to MTBF, but specifically applies to non-repairable systems. It measures the expected time to failure for a new system or component. MTTF is a useful metric for understanding how long a device or a system can typically perform before it fails. This helps in assessing the product lifespan, scheduling the replacements, and managing the asset's lifecycle effectively, ensuring that replacements are planned before the system's end of life. So a hard drive would typically fails after 1000 hours of use, so you must be careful about that to change it before the actual failure happens. Then we have failure in time. We call it as FIT as well. It's a metric that qualifies the number of failures that can be expected per billion hours of operation. So this metric is used extensively in manufacturing and production industries to predict the reliability of the component over the extended periods of time. Now, by understanding FIT rates, the companies can better assess the reliability of the components under continuous operations, which is critical for systems requiring high reliability and minimizing the downtime. So a component rated as a 10 FIT indicates that it is expected to fail 10 times in 1 billion hours of operations. After that, we have risk calculations. Now, it is very important to understand and to practice it for the risk assessment. We have single loss expectancy, then we have annual loss expectancy, then we have risk exposure factor, risk register, and risk matrix, or we call it as heat map as well. So if we'll define single loss expectancy, it's a calculation used to estimate the monetary loss from the single occurrence of a risk. It would combine the value of an asset with the exposure factor, which represent the percentage value that could be lost in case of an incident. And now, for example, if you'll see that if an asset value is of $10,000 and the exposure factor is 0.2, then the single loss expectancy would be 10,000 into 0.2, which would be a cost of $2,000 over there. Then we have annual loss expectancy. It extends the concept of SLE over a year to estimate the annual expected monetary loss for each risk. Now, it is calculated by multiplying the SLE by the annual rate of occurrence of the risk event. So if we'll see it in an example, so we'll have the SLE, for example, the rate was 2000 and the risk occurrence twice a year, then SLE into 2 would be total $4,000 as the annual loss expectancy of that item. Then risk exposure factor is there. Risk exposure factor quantifies the percentage of an asset's value likely to be lost during a particular risk. It is used for calculating the SLE and helps in understanding that how much of an asset is at risk. So in order to calculate it, we'll see that if a risk could lead to loss of $3,000 on an asset valued of $10,000, then the risk exposure factor would be $3,000 divided by $10,000, which would be 0.3, and we'll come up with a percentage which would be the possibility of 30% over there. Then we have risk register. The risk register is the management tool used to document all identified risk along with the its nature, likelihood, potential impacts, and the measures in place to manage them. It serves as a centralized database along with the organizations to monitor, review the risk systematically, and to ensure that all risks are known and can be accessed by and can be managed by relevant stakeholders, etc. So example could be a risk register might list the risk of a data breach, including the details of a likelihood, which could be the high impact, and the impact could be critical, and the mitigation strategies could be implemented like the encryption, etc. Then we have risk metrics, or we call it as a heat map as well, is a visual tool used to categorize the risk based on their severity and likelihood, helping the stakeholders quickly understand which risks are the most critical and should be prioritized. So if we look at the risk metrics, it might categorize the risk into levels such as low, medium, high, and critical based on their likelihood and the potential impact on the operations, etc. Now we have different approaches to risk management. So risk tolerance refers to the acceptable level of variation in outcomes. For example, risk appetite in the total amount of risk an organization is willing to take. We have two things in this one, which are risk tolerance and risk appetite. So if we'll explain, risk tolerance is about understanding the specific limits an organization sets on the amount of the risk it can handle to pursue its objectives. It's like knowing how much fluctuation in outcomes the organization can endure without significant disruptions. Then we have risk appetite. Now, on the other hand, the broader general attitude towards taking risk, it reflects to the overall amount of the risk organization is prepared to accept to achieve its strategic goal. While the risk tolerance defines the boundaries, risk appetite sets the tone and direction for how the risk would be approached in a broad manner. Now we have an example of it, as the financial institution may have the risk tolerance that allows for losses up to 5% in its portfolio, but the risk appetite that seeks the higher returns despite volatility. Now we have different strategies that would be there to address the risk. Various methods organization can adapt to manage the risk effectively. First of all, we have accept. So we'll have to accept the risk. Accepting the risk means that deciding to proceed with the business decision without taking any step in mitigating the risk. This approach is used when the potential impact is within the organization risk tolerance. So example could be a startup company may accept the risk of using new software without the insurance. Then we have transfer. Transfer means transferring the risk involves shifting the potential impact of the risk to a third party, typical insurance or maybe outsourcing. This strategy helps in reducing the direct exposure to the risk. So a business might purchase a cyber insurance. Then we have avoidance. Avoidance means that avoid the risk means that choosing not to engage with the activities that generate risk. This could involve altering the plan to sidestep the potential issues or deciding against starting a project known to carry the high risk. A company might decide not to enter a high risk market, for example. And then we have mitigation. Mitigation means that maintaining the or mitigating the risk involves taking the active steps in reducing the likelihood or impact of the risk. That might include implementing controls, developing alternative strategies, or enhancing the security measures. An organization could implement the stricter access controls to reduce the risk on unauthorized access, etc. Now after this one, we have governance and compliance. Now you might have heard of all these terms like service level agreements, business partnership agreement, memorandum of understanding, non-disclosure agreement, then measurement of the system analysis, memorandum of agreement, and work order or statement of work. So service line agreement is there, a contract which outlines the expected service levels between the service provider and a customer. So it's kind of an agreement between the services which are rendered to you, so that you know that what are your responsibilities and what would be the responsibility of the customer. So a SLA may specify the response times for the technical support and uptime, runtime for the services, etc. Then we have business partnership agreement, a formal agreement between two or more parties outlining the terms of the business relationship, etc. Now BPA means a detail of a profit sharing agreement, could be there between the two companies. Then we have memorandum of understanding, a non-binding agreement outlining the intentions of parties incorporation to its certain area. So a memorandum of understanding could be signed between the organizations intending to collaborate on a research work without the legal obligations. Then non-disclosure alliance, it's a legal contract ensuring that the parties would keep or maintain the information and the confidentiality of the information. So an NDA would be used when a company shares the trade secrets with the potential partner. Then we have the measurement system analysis, the evaluation of the accuracy and reliability of the measurement systems. It can assess that how well a gauge measures a physical dimension in manufacturing. Then we have memorandum of agreement, a formal document obtaining the terms of agreement between the parties to ensure the clarity and accountability. So it would outline the responsibilities and the deliverables on each party of the project. Then we have work order or the statement of work, the documents that would specify the details of the scope of the work to be completed on the project. So it might be the details of the task timeline or the deliverables for the contractor who are hired to build a software or a project, etc. Then we have compliance and governance documents. In that we have audit plan, audit evidence, audit report, due diligence documentation, site visit report, and stakeholder interview notes. So an audit plan outlines the objective, scope, and the timeline for an audit. It serves as the roadmap for the audit process details, like what would be examined, the methodologies to be used, and who will be involved in that. So the plan is critical for ensuring that the audit is conducted systematically and covers all necessary areas of the SS compliance with the applicable laws, regulations, and internal policies. So example could be an audit, a financial audit which would be conducted in an organization. Then we have audit evidence. It consists of documents, statements, and the data collected during the audit that supports the finding and conclusions. This evidence can include financial records, transaction logs, emails, contracts, and other documentation that can verify the accuracy of the organization's financial statements of compliance status. Collecting the robust audit evidence is a fundamental for validating the audits resulting supporting and recommendations are made. So the transaction records and the compliance reports and interviews, etc., could be conducted. Then we have audit reports. It's a formal output of a audit process. It includes the auditor's conclusions and any findings that indicate the discrepancies or the areas of risk. The report would provide the stakeholder with an assessment of the organization's adherence to the governance standards and regulatory requirements. It also includes the recommendations for improvement or the corrective actions wherever required. So a report detailing the discrepancies are there. Then we have due diligence. Due diligence documentation would capture all the research and analysis conducted, assessing the financial health, compliance, and operational visibility of the business entity before entering into agreement or transactions. The documentation would help the stakeholders make informed decisions and to mitigate potential risks associated with mergers, acquisitions, or other significant business deals. So that's due diligence. Then we have site report or site visit reports. It's a document that writes or documents the outcomes, observations from a physical inspection of a business location or facility, whether it's a part of a environmental audit or safety inspection or an operational review. This report provides detailed insights into the actual conditions on ground, helping to verify the compliance with the physical security measures, safety protocols, and environment regulations. Then we have stakeholder interview notes. These are the records of conversations held with the key personnel, partners, or the external stakeholders during the audit or due diligence process. These notes are invaluable for gaining the insights into the operational practices, cultural aspects, and the challenges within the organization. They also help in collaboration or to find the data of the information gathering through different sources, providing more comprehensive view of the organizational operations and compliance status, etc. Finally, we have security training and awareness. Now it's a structured educational initiative aimed to enhance the employees' knowledge and skills related to security policies and practices within an organization. So if we say that computer-based training is required, it refers to online training modules that the employees can complete at their own pace. These are modular and designed to provide a flexible initiative learning experience through multimedia content such as videos, quizzes, or interactive scenarios. Computer-based trainings would allow the employees to understand the complex security concepts in an engaging manner. This would also help particularly in effective and is also effective because it can easily update and it is always updated and distributed across the organization, ensuring that all employees have access to the latest security trainings, etc. Then we have role-based awareness training. It's tailored to specific responsibilities and security needs of different roles within the organization. For example, IT staff may receive advanced training on network security, while the HR personnel might focus on data privacy concerns related to the employee information. This is targeted approach, and it would ensure that each employee would understand the specific security risk and protocols relevant to their positions, enhancing the overall security posture of the organization. Then we have gamification. It involves using game-like elements such as the points, leaderboards, or the badges to make learning more engaging. By incorporating these elements into the security training, organizations can motivate the employees to participate actively and retain the information better. Gamification will not only make the learning process enjoyable, but it would also encourage a competitive spirit that can lead to higher participation rates and better understanding of the material. Finally, we have phishing simulations. These are the practical exercises where the employees receive simulated phishing emails designed to mimic the real-time phishing attempts. Now, the purpose of these simulations is to test the employees' ability to recognize and respond appropriately to the phishing threats. These exercises provide a safe environment for the employees to learn from mistakes and to understand the consequences of failing for the phishing attacks, thereby improving their vigilance and response to actual threats. So that was our course on CompTIA Security Plus Guide to Network Security and Fundamentals. I hope you gained some knowledge on it. If you liked the videos, please like and subscribe and share the channel with others. That's it for today. I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.